Welcome to the infamous edition of the Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation done through creative storytelling of history's most infamous people. Now, let's meet our guest. Welcome to the podcast. Let's start at the absolute beginning, where the public narrative hasn't yet distorted who you were. When and where were you born, and what was your given name?
Hi, Calvin. I was born on February 3, 1904, down in Adairsville, Bartow County, Georgia. My parents named me Charles Arthur Floyd. Back then, long before the newspapers painted me as a public enemy, I was just a regular country boy from Georgia.
What was your hometown and home life like as a child?
When I was about 7 years old, in 1911, my family packed up and moved out to a farming community in Aikens, Oklahoma, which became my real hometown. My parents, Walter Lee Floyd and Mamie Helena Eccles, were tenant farmers. I grew up with 7 brothers and sisters in a big, crowded household. Home life was all about survival and hard, back-breaking work. We spent long, exhausting days working in the hot cotton fields, just trying to scratch out a living, which was typical for a lot of poor country folks out there at the time.
Was there a story behind your name or a nickname that stuck with you?
Oh, there is a big story behind it, and it is a name I absolutely detested. The papers and the public called me Pretty Boy Floyd. It started during my first big payroll heist in St. Louis, when a paymaster witness described me to a reporter as a mere boy, a pretty boy with apple cheeks, and the press ran wild with it. I hated it. No one who actually knew me ever used it. To my family and friends back home, my nickname was always Chalk, because I had a big fondness for Choctaw beer as a young man.
What were you like as a child, and how many years of schooling did you actually attend?
Growing up on the farm, I was generally known as a good, well-behaved kid who rarely got into any real trouble. But as I grew older, I set off to work with the traveling harvest crews in Kansas and Oklahoma, and I fell in with a lot of older drifters and vagabonds who taught me how to fight, kick, and fend for myself. As for school, I only completed the 6th grade before walking away from the classroom completely. Back in those days on the frontier, finishing the 6th grade was considered a perfectly adequate education for a farm kid who needed to work the fields.
What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
When I was 20 years old, I fell in love and married a local woman named Ruby Hardgrave, and we had a beautiful baby boy named Charles Dempsey Floyd. I tried following the family tradition of working long hours doing manual labor in the fields to support them. But I became deeply discouraged, knowing that a lifetime of heavy sweat was bringing in next to no pay. I decided to head to Missouri and Arkansas with a buddy to knock over a few local service stations and grocery stores for some quick cash. It felt like small-time stuff to buy groceries, but that taste of easy money is exactly what permanently derailed me from the straight and narrow path.
Let's talk about your early run-ins with the law. Before the world knew your name for your most infamous actions, what was your very first arrest or interaction with law enforcement, and what were the consequences?
My absolute first interaction with law enforcement happened when I was just a reckless 18-year-old kid in Oklahoma, when I got caught stealing $3.50 from a local post office. But my first major consequence came on September 16, 1925, in St. Louis, Missouri. I was arrested for holding up a Kroger payroll delivery truck and making off with almost $12,000. My buddy and I got cocky and immediately bought a flashy new car with the loot, which pointed the police right to us. The consequence was a 5-year sentence for first-degree robbery at the Missouri State Penitentiary in Jefferson City.
At what moment did you realize your name would never be forgotten?
It was in the early 1930s when my operations exploded across the Midwest. After serving 3.5 years of my sentence, I won my parole and swore I would never see the inside of a prison cage again. I teamed up with heavy hitters, adopted the machine gun as my professional trademark, and launched a massive string of 15 to 20 bank robberies across Ohio, Michigan, and Kentucky. The moment the local newspapers and national true crime magazines started publishing colorful front-page tales of my daring escapes, I knew my name was permanently etched into public memory.
Did fame make you more dangerous, or did it simply expose who you already were?
The fame completely exaggerated my skill, but it certainly exposed my absolute lack of restraint when it came to avoiding capture. In December of 1930, after getting caught for a bank job in Sylvania, Ohio, they sentenced me to 12 years. While they were transporting me to the state penitentiary on a moving train, I broke loose, kicked open the window, and jumped right out into the night to make my getaway. The national notoriety didn't make me dangerous, but it turned me into a legendary fugitive who was always one step ahead of the law.
Who do you believe betrayed you first? A person, society, or your own instincts?
I think society's economic devastation during the Great Depression is what initially pushed me into a life of crime. But it was my own overconfidence that ultimately brought me down. I thought I could outrun the law forever on the back roads. But after the federal authorities intensified their hunt for me, my luck completely ran out in an ordinary field, when the combined forces of the federal agents and local officers closed off every single one of my exit routes.
What was your most unique habit or a random fact about you that would surprise people?
People are always surprised to learn that on my official wanted posters, under the marks and scars section, it listed that I carried exactly one distinct tattoo. It was a nurse in a rose, which folks in the tattoo world call the Rose of No Man's Land. A legendary tattoo artist named Burt Grimm put it on my shoulder at his shop in St. Louis, and the U.S. Marshal later used that exact tattoo to verify my identity during a transfer because I had my shirt off to beat the heat.
What did the public never understand about the pressure you were under at the time?
The public loved the romance of the outlaw, but they never understood the grueling pressure of running from a multi-state dragnet. By the spring of 1934, federal authorities were passing tough new crime laws that turned bank robbery into a federal offense and carried heavy penalties for machine guns. Knowing that the local police forces were starting to coordinate nationally, and that I was a legitimate target for heavily armed federal agents, created a non-stop, exhausting pressure.
Did you have any known rivalries that defined your career?
My definitive rivalry was against the federal agents of the Bureau of Investigation, specifically the famous Department of Justice manhunter Melvin Purvis. After John Dillinger was brought down in July of 1934, J. Edgar Hoover officially named me Public Enemy Number 1. It became a high-stakes, bitter battle between my ability to hide and Melvin Purvis's absolute determination to track me down.
What personal battles were you fighting privately while the world was watching?
Privately, I was fighting to maintain my ties to my family while living as a hunted Calvin. The newspapers painted this picture of loyalist women and a glamorous gangland life, but the reality was that my wife had divorced me while I was locked away in Jefferson City and had moved on. I was fighting a private battle against total isolation, constantly depending on the shelter of locals in the hills just to have a warm meal and a place to rest my head.
What was your darkest moment, and was there ever a time you wanted to walk away from it all?
The absolute darkest period began in June of 1933, when authorities accused me of participating in the horrific Union Station massacre in Kansas City, where an FBI agent, a prisoner, and 3 local police officers were killed in a bloody ambush. I fiercely denied having anything to do with that slaughter until the day I died, but the government used it to turn me into a monster. After that, the hunt intensified so badly that there was no way to walk away. I was trapped on a road where the only options were a casket or a cage.
What truth was hardest to escape when you were alone at night?
The hardest truth to escape was that my run was coming to a fast, violent end. Alone at night, hiding out in the woods or in the back of a car, I had to face the reality that the federal government had completely changed the rules of the game. The days of outrunning old trucks driven by small-town marshals were entirely over, and the dragnet was closing in tighter with every passing sunset.
When the law finally closed in, how exactly were you brought to justice? Walk me through the final arrest, the charges that ultimately stuck, and the legal outcome of your trials.
I never actually made it to a final courtroom trial or a prison cell at the end of my run. After years of evading the authorities, the law finally closed in on October 22nd, 1934. I was hiding out with associates and riding in a car near East Liverpool, Ohio, when local lawmen spotted us. I didn't surrender to stand trial on bank robbery or murder charges. Instead, I bolted from the vehicle and ran as fast as I could across a local farm field, desperate to reach the cover of the tree line.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you? And what part of your story has been exaggerated the most?
The papers wildly exaggerated our criminal skills, making it sound like Depression-era outlaws were criminal geniuses who were entirely too cool under pressure to ever lose a shootout. The print media was desperate to entertain readers during economic hard times, so they took our minor successes against underfunded local cops and turned them into colorful, wildly exaggerated legends that had very little actual truth to them.
What is the biggest misconception people have about your life?
The biggest misconception is that I was a cold-hearted villain to the ordinary folks. The people of Oklahoma actually looked at me as a modern-day Robin Hood, calling me the Robin Hood of the Cookson Hills. Folklore claims that whenever I robbed a bank, I would purposefully burn all the mortgage papers right there in the vault, freeing hundreds of poor, starving farmers from their debts, which is why the locals protected me from the police for so long.
What would surprise people most about your ordinary human side?
It would surprise people to know how much I truly loved my roots in Oklahoma, despite the chaos. When I died, the regular folks out there showed me an immense amount of respect. I had the largest funeral in the entire history of the state of Oklahoma up to that point, with anywhere between 20,000 and 40,000 everyday citizens showing up to my burial in Aiken Cemetery just to pay their final respects to Chalk.
When, where, and how did you pass away?
I passed away on October 22nd, 1934, in a rural field near East Liverpool, Ohio. I was only 30 years old, and my life came to an immediate end when I was shot down by federal agents and local officers led by Melvin Purvis while I was running for the tree line.
Was your downfall caused more by your own flaws or by the world changing around you?
It was a bit of both, Calvin. My flaw was thinking my timing and luck would hold out forever. But the world changed drastically around me when the federal government stepped in with new gun laws and cross-border authority. Once the Bureau of Investigation brought their methodical nationwide pursuit to the table, our old advantages completely vanished, and a lone outlaw didn't stand a chance.
What past regrets did you carry with you to the end? If you could erase one decision from your life, would you? Or was it necessary to become who you were?
I regretted that the road of crime ultimately separates you from an honest family life. But as the old folks out in the hills used to say, you can't turn back on the crime road once you start down it. I carried my choices right to that Ohio cornfield, maintaining my innocence regarding that Kansas City massacre until the very end.
What scared you more? Getting caught? Losing power? Or being forgotten?
Spending the rest of my days rotting inside a maximum security prison cell scared me far more than getting caught or facing a bullet. I had sworn after my first stretch that I would never see the inside of a prison again, and that extreme fear of losing my physical freedom is exactly why I chose to run across that open field instead of putting my hands up.
When you look back now, do you see yourself as the villain, the hero, or something in between?
The government permanently recorded me as a public enemy and a notorious bank robber. But to the poor country folks of the Depression era, I was a tragic figure of hard times and a benefactor who stood up against the banks. I see myself as something in between, a country kid who made a bad choice due to poverty and became a legend of the American road.
Do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before signing off?
I just want to leave the folks with a line that my buddy Woody Guthrie later put into a song about me. As through this world you travel, you'll meet some funny men. Some will rob you with a 6-gun, and some with a fountain pen. Just keep your eyes open out there, and thanks for the talk, Calvin.
And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, do better with the life you have been given and choose to do good in this life. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.